Well, let me introduce Claudia. Claudia Wittig holds a master's in history and philology from the University of Greifswald in Germany and a PhD in medieval history and literature from the University of Southern Denmark. She has worked in the UK, Germany, France, and Belgium. Her recent, she's quite representative of the whole conference here, at least the European dimension. Her recent research projects focused on the distribution of norms and values across Northwestern Europe in the Middle Ages by means of literature and the insights this process provides us into the personal morality of medieval reader and patrons of literature. It is at the same time an exploration into the beginnings of a pan-European value system. A follow-up project will discuss the construction of urban identities in literary production in the later Middle Ages and argues that the absence of legitimizing factors such as a dynastic continuity and service led to a turn to more individualized conceptions of identity. Wittig's work is always interdisciplinary and combines historical research with English, French, and German philology. She has been an avid reader of the works of Terry Pratchett for many years and is particularly interested in the complex morality of Discworld and his readers. And she is going to talk to us about God's moral superior, individual ethics, and the reception of the Discworld novels. Thank you very much, Claudia, for stepping in a little bit early.
Yes, thank you. Good morning from sunny York. So I'm actually in the right time zone for once. And yeah, thank you to the organizers for this wonderful conference. I'm very sorry that I couldn't join yesterday, but I'm very much looking forward to today's papers and to meeting Colin later on. I'm going to start with a brief quotation that also inspired the title of my talk today. During a dinner with the ball captains of Ankh-Morpork in the Great Hall of Unseen University, the patrician Havelock veterinary treats the reader to a rare piece of his mind. He tells a story that he witnessed as a child, and he concludes, I'm sure you all know the story, and he concludes that, and that's when I first learned about evil. It is built into the very nature of the universe. Every world spins in pain. If there is any kind of supreme being, I told myself, it is up to all of us to become his moral superior. It all started for me with this quote. When I read it for the first time, I had been an avid reader of the Discworld novels for many years, but it was only at this point that I began to wonder about its morality. These words spoken by veterinary, did they refer to a moral agenda in the books? The Discworld novels, as I'm sure you agree, are frequently peppered with highly quotable wisdom. In my interaction with fans, I found that readers of Discworld actively seek them out for guidance in their lives or to offer them to each other as forms of advice. Much more than with many other fantasy novels, I'm sure no one would go look for moral guidance in J.R.R. Martin's books, for example. So in this paper, I will explore some of the reasons why the Discworld novels are so prone to being quoted in response to the challenges of our everyday lives. I argue that readers are not seeking for a comprehensive value system. Indeed, I will try to demonstrate that there isn't even necessarily one, but that practical moral advice given by relatable characters is actually much more useful for them in their practical struggles in their lives. While this is an approach that focuses on the reception of the books, as I will explore the moral guidance readers take from the Discworld novels, I will also comment on the moral universe of the Discworld and relate it to the research into modern-day value systems. In order to understand why readers refer to the Discworld books for their life advice, I've taken samples from social media, Facebook groups, and I've also tried Twitter hashtags, Discworld, Terry Pratchett, and Terry over the period of a few weeks to see which scenes and quotes come up most frequently when people relate their own life experiences to Discworld. I can tell you it's the best form of productive procrastination that you can imagine. I mined most of my data from the largest Discworld fan groups on Facebook with more than 10,000, or in another one, more than 8,000 members. And in these groups, members share not just their thoughts on the books, but also things that occupy them in general, often to receive considerable encouragement and empathy from other members. Since fandom communities tend to acquire their distinct identities and expressions, I compared two groups with one another, and I searched for quotes that mentioned, that were mentioned in the context of someone's personal struggle. This criterion is important because when I was just searching for quotes, the one that most frequently popped up was "cats are nice." This is the internet after all. So now using social media for quantitative analysis is notoriously difficult. Even though today Facebook is no longer the sole domain of young people, many older users do not engage with it as intensely, and there might be fewer traces. The Color of Magic was published in 1983, so many of the most loyal readers will now be well into their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and maybe not be as active on Facebook. Also, while the Facebook groups that I took as a sample are fairly international, they are also very Anglo-centric, so I will definitely have missed many voices from readers elsewhere. And I also found that Twitter was not a particularly good source to search for Discord quotes in connection to people's personal struggles, just because the time limitation means that people are not actually telling so much of their stories in connection to the quotations. So that means that the Facebook groups that I've mostly mined for data have a specific demographic, and readers often have a particular social background. So that means that this is not representative for all readers of the Discworld novels. And maybe a solution to this could be to have an actual reader survey at a later point. So this is just like a test case study to see what I could come up with. The charm of this is, of course, that people are using the quotations in a fairly sort of intuitive way without explicitly being asked about them. When I went through the conversations of users and Terry Pratchett fan groups for analysis, first of all, I had to adjust my expectations because people did not all that often refer to a particular quotation, but very often to what they felt was an overall sense of practical morality that they sort of felt was present in the Discworld novels. In one Facebook group, members frequently expressed the aim or the request to be more Terry. So this is not quite easy to establish what this means, but perhaps it means something a little different every time it is used. But the essence seems to be that to treat fellow humans with common decency and common sense. So readers often seem to have a sense of Terry Pratchett's own sense of morality that derives in part from some well-known phrases Terry said during interviews, such as famously the one about the evidence of the existence of his car keys as opposed to that of God, or things that people said about him, such as Christopher already said, this quotation by Neil Gaiman that Terry was driven by anger rather than being a jolly elf that people often try to make of him. So these feature into some readers' idea of what Terry's morality was like, but also largely they take this from the moral lessons that they found in his writing. But does this actually mean that the Discworld novels convey a consistent value system to which readers could subscribe in order to live better lives? Researchers seem to agree that the value system in the Discworld novels is one of essential humanism. There have been quite some studies on this field, in which the individual choice takes center stage. And in part, this is, of course, true. I would like to argue, however, that the morality of Terry's writing appeals to readers so much because it frames individual choice and an idea of human nature in its social context, and by consequence is not systematic. It is true that the Discworld novels put significant emphasis on the right to make choices. Carrot has the choice not to be king, Ascarina has the choice to be a wizard, and so on and so forth. So even the narrative force that runs the Discworld cannot prevent people from choosing their own destinies. However, it frequently becomes clear that the right to choose also includes the right to suffer the consequences. And several characters also make clear that they don't really trust the human ability to choose what is good for them. Granny Weatherwax says as much, and so does Veterinary, and on occasion, and also Wimes, for instance, on Night Watch. This implies that sometimes those who are better at understanding human beings have to either overrule what the people decided they wanted, as Veterinary does very often, or take on the consequences of their behavior, or take away the necessity to choose at all, as the witches very often do. It seems that some people's choices are not as important as others. How does this sit with the general humanist, democratic, and enabling tendency of the books? Well, it doesn't, and it doesn't have to. What researchers sometimes overlooked is that Terry wrote characters, not a manual to ethical living. While there are some basic morals to take away from the books, the good does not always win, justice is not always done, and there's no coherent moral system that one simply has to unearth from the words of the creator, as Terry is sometimes called. Discworld's characters are way too interesting and varied to subscribe to one same set of neatly defined values. The readers know this, and they don't see guidance in the book as a whole to sort of find one complete system, but they choose characters with whom they identify, and they put themselves into their shoes. In fandom, accordingly, one does not generally read I did as the Discworld Novels told me or something, or I did as Terry would do, but instead users sometimes write things like I channeled my inner granny, or Vimes would go spare, or what would Veterinary do, or variations of thereof. Reference to Discord characters are used for. Okay, I just. So reference to Discord characters that are used for moral guidance are here in this example that I've just given, the witches and Commander Vimes. And a list of actual quotations that I found in these groups, and these are the ones most frequently used, they produce the same result. So we get, you do the job that is in front of you. It's very often mentioned in terms of personal struggles or difficulties to make decisions. And this is actually a quotation that is said by several characters, at least by two, Sam Vimes and Nightwash, and Granny Weatherwax in I Shall Go at Midnight, and then also quoted again by Agnes, for example. This one, something Granny Weatherwax says in Witches Abroad, which is also a popular tattoo motif, as we will probably hear later. A very popular one was, them as can do has to do for them as can't, and someone has to speak up for them as has no voices, which is said by Granny Aking, by Tiffany's grandmother in We Free Men, though it is sometimes attributed to Granny Weatherwax. No excuses at all. Once you had a good excuse, you opened the door for bad excuses. Vimes says this, referring to, well, a number of things. In this case, in Nightwatch, it's about reading to a son. But as we all know, Vimes is struggling with a number of things to which this quotation could apply. A very emblematic one is people as things. That's where it starts. Granny Weatherwax says this to the Omnian priest, as in what is the basis for evil, for where things go wrong. It's when people are treated as things. And another quote that's actually used by several people, in several books, personal isn't the same as important. So these were the quotes that I found most frequently used in Facebook fandom groups when people are sort of giving advice to other people's struggles or were referring to their own struggles. And again, we see that the witches are used for moral guidance very often. The wizards aren't even mentioned once. And then there's also Vimes. As we can see, several quotes are actually said by Vimes and the witches several times throughout the books. So what does that tell us about Vimes and the witches, and how is that received by readers? Firstly, as other researchers have already observed, Vimes and the Witches have a number of things in common. There are no heroes in an ordinary sense. They mostly win by sheer commitment and hard work, by being able to put others first, by making the hard decisions, and by not expecting, and very often not getting, anything in return. Both Vimes and the Witches constantly combat their own inner darkness. In contrast to, for instance, Carrot, who's just inherently a nice guy, both Vimes and especially Granny Weatherwax know that they have the potential to act very differently. They do the right thing because they decide to do it, and they constantly control themselves to ensure that they are not drifting towards the darkness. They are also, to put it with Nanny, common as muck. They are thus very highly relatable. So is there perhaps a shared system of values that Vimes and the Witches purport? Well, there isn't. It's not a system really. It's they have some common values, but even within themselves, each character isn't excessively coherent. So Vimes, for instance, insists that personal isn't the same as important, but he regularly acts against his own advice, and he even marvels about Carrot's compliance to this rule. Granny Weatherwax challenges her sister over her manipulation of human lives, but Granny herself constantly meddles with just about everyone. Both, however, convey a strong sense of knowing who they are. Granny's "this one" is so compelling because in our postmodern society, people so often feel that they are out of touch with themselves. They have to find themselves somehow, as a large amount of books on that theme in the bookstores will confirm. What Vimes and the Witches tell the reader is that they can do the best, they can start doing the best they can from wherever they are right now. Do the job that is in front of you means not to constantly question one's destination alive or find a greater sense in one's work or debate fundamental principles. It means that a person knows what needs to be done and they better go and do it. This is how they are most useful to their communities. And the communities are, in the end, what both Vimes and the Witches care about. The Witches about their own steadings and the kingdom of Lancre, and Vimes about Ankh-Morpork. And both also take responsibility for others even as they leave their homes, as Vimes does in Snuff and the Witches as they go abroad. They care and they make decisions based on common sense. And all that, they have compassion for the weaknesses of others, even if this is expressed in rather cynical ways. Vimes knows that everybody is guilty of something, and the Witches know that people are on average rather stupid. This is another side of their appeal to readers. They don't have to believe in the good in everyone, the way Carrot does, for instance, but they can decide to do what is right, knowing that people can be a nuisance. As opposed to some other approaches to morality that presuppose some rather too idealistic assumptions on human nature, this is much closer to what readers can observe in their lives and relate to. The advice conveyed in these quotations is practical and applicable to many situations, and this is my second point, and they don't require that one buys into a complex system of values, other than the basic notion that what people do matters, and that in general, people matter, as the people as things quotation confirms. The focus on choice is one that is very present in our modern neoliberal society. The narrative often goes that if you make good choices and if you work hard, you will succeed. Happiness is presented as a choice, economic success is, and so are education and meaningful relationships. The Discworld and its characters, with all its endorsement of choice, does not fool its readers like this. It acknowledges that life is unfair, that choices are hard, and that engagement and hard work is more often than not rewarded. Both Vimes and the Witches make clear often enough that though choices are important, they don't guarantee anything. Sam Vimes boots the theory of socioeconomic unfairness, and many more of his utterances acknowledge that people do not start out from the same position, and that some will never make it as far as others who never even had to think about the consequences in their lives. The witches know that bad things happen and that more often than not, the reward for digging the biggest hole is a bigger shovel. All this goes essentially against the success narratives frequently purported in various media, self-help books, and some parties' political messages. Commitment, we learn from Vimes and the Witches, has to be there for the sake of itself. People engage in the good of their communities because they value them. Alistair MacIntyre, a modern philosopher, has observed that modern-day virtue ethics is no longer tied into an overarching value system. There's no shared mythos that ties individual values together. So the basic values that connect readers and their Discworld role models basically is just a shared sense of the value of human lives and their freedom. The details, however, when individual choices can or must be overruled and by whom, must be decided on a day-to-day basis by common sense, basically. These considerations are made pragmatically, not idealistically, and this is why they are so applicable. A point in case is Lord Vetinari, who can really not be accused of idealism, but is probably the most fiercely pragmatic character, as evidenced by his family motto, Si non confectus, non reficiat. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Dedicating his life to the functioning of Ankh-Morpork, he often rules against what people believe to be their will, but what Vetinari thinks is needed for the community. He has no illusions about being liked, about people's gratefulness, or about some eternal reward that awaits him after he is done. To him, there is no moral superior. Vetinari is essentially doing the job that is in front of him. Just as Granny, he makes unpopular decisions, he takes responsibility, and he receives nothing in return. That he does not serve as a role model in the same way Vimes or the Witches do is surely due to his superior intelligence and his political power, which of course makes him less relatable. The advice that readers take from the books allows them to continue to live in this world with its own stories and getting through life a little more at ease with themselves, knowing that they don't need to believe in anything, they don't need to challenge the system or even be a perfect person. They mine the Discworld novels for moral guidance picked from quotable utterances of characters, and these characters' struggles render their morality even more relatable. It's the pragmatic and the unsystematic that actually helps them more in their everyday lives than a comprehensive and idealistic value system would do. There's no requirement for moral superiority, but it also means there's no superior moral judgment. What people need to do and what many of the Discworld characters do is the job in front of them and treat people as people. This enables them to make good moral choices without reference to a superior. There is no justice, there is no system that will put everything right. Instead, there are a million everyday choices, and sometimes they will turn out well. Is that all there is to it? As Ipslor asked Death in Soul Music, well, almost. There is also cats, and cats are nice. Thank you, that's it. Here's some literature that I have used for the talk. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Claudia. Questions are already coming in the chat. If you don't mind, I'll start off with a question of my own, which is just to follow on from your conclusion. It's not a particularly well-formed question, I apologize, but is there a downside to not having a superior moral judgment? Is there, it's a question about, I guess, philosophy rather than the analysis of the Pratchett work. But yeah, what would people be missing without the coherent value system and the superior moral judgment?
I think it's a very good question, and one that I've asked myself as well several times. And yes, it's something that I have to answer from the perspective of a sort of kitchen table philosopher. And I think the answer is what they miss out, what can be missed out on if you don't have an actual system is it can be very easy just to sort of pick the things that one likes about it without actually having to go all the way, without and also without ever having to challenge their own life experiences, the system, the world around them. You can very comfortably sit in any situation that you like or not like, and just pick some small snippets of wisdom, and they will probably make things better in many ways, and they will allow you to sort of get through life in an easier way, but they might also prevent you from sort of getting up and overhauling the whole thing, if you get my meaning.
Yeah, thank you. Now I'll start with a few questions that came in early, very practical. One person was wondering if you could, if you are allowed to name the Facebook groups that you used.
I know that there are actually some members here in the chat. One of them is very aptly called "We Ain't Dead," which is a lovely group. It's full of wonderful people, and they are very helpful with one another. And a lot of people are actually coming there to discuss things that are, they are struggling with. And the other one is called Terry Pratchett Discworld. I think those are the two largest Facebook groups on the Discworld books.
Excellent. And another person was wondering if, apart from this presentation, is there an actual paper that is coming out of your talk today?
So far there isn't, because I feel that my samples may not actually, I think I have to sort of refine the methodology of this and actually have a proper survey, because the data samples that I have are too small for an actual quantitative analysis. So this is just like a case study. There might be something on a blog or so once, but not right now. If there is, I will put it in the link under the YouTube talk when it goes online.
Excellent, thank you. So do you think that fantasy is a good genre in which to discuss morality, more so than maybe other genres?
I do, yes, very much so. And I'm always very much surprised by how little daring authors sometimes are when they have the genre of fantasy where they can actually think all the things. They don't have to be realistic. They don't have to be historically accurate or anything. So they could actually do all sorts of things in which they could sort of explore different, moral grounds and things like this. And I find that very often they are rather conservative. And I think there's much more potential in fantasy than it has been explored yet. It might be due to the fact that authors also have to eat and sell books in order to earn their living, and that sometimes it's a bit difficult to get readers to sort of digest a very different moral approach. And I think Terry Pratchett has gone much further with this than many other authors. But there's much more in this, I feel.
And following from the absence of the moral superiors in the texts, do you think that the witches and others, vines, carrots, Tinari, fulfill that role for other characters in the texts?
I'm not sure I got this entirely. You mean if they are role models for like sort of internally?
Within the books, yeah, within the world, within the plots.
Yes, I do. Well, Granny is surely. And for instance, the one about doing the job in front of you is also quoted again by Agnes, for instance. And it's also, I think, like Tiffany takes some guidance by her, even though they all sort of find their own personalities. But I think there is some internal role modeling. I think Vimes also sort of looks at veterinary a little bit for some aspects, but then makes his own decisions. So I think there is some there's a lot of sort of cross-referencing within the characters of Discworld books, and that I think is the more important bit. In the end, they all have to come from different places and are in different situations, so they have to make different decisions. So this is one of the things why I mean there can be no system, because each of these characters are so embedded in their own social and cultural situations that what is right for one character wouldn't necessarily be right for another.
Very good, thank you. I have a long one here, and yeah. Pratchett often puts morality and good principles at the center of his books, yet repeatedly shows that noble choices do not necessarily bring rewards. Do you think this is the author arguing that the only route to contentment is expectation management? And is this not potentially encouraging apathy? So, a probing question.
I'm not sure about expectation management. Well, surely, I mean, there's probably expectation management is a key to a happier life in general, as people would frequently not reward effort and good choices as they should. But mostly, I think the point is to do things for the sake of themselves. So something that I didn't really explore in too many details is the way both Granny and Vimes they are a character that there are characters that cannot actually act differently. So in Nightwatch, there's a scene when one of the history monks says to Vimes, like, there is no universe in which Vimes would kill his wife, and there's also the bit in Lords and Ladies where Esmeralda Weatherwax is like, there's no universe where she would hurt a child, for instance. So I think much of the morality of these characters it's just kind of inherent to them. It's just that the part of what they are. So I think doing the right thing has very much to do with just sort of deciding what kind of person one is, and do the thing for the sake of itself, and not so much for any reward that might come for it.
So not encouraging apathy. That's good news. Thank you. Let me just check for a more recent one. I had two more, I think, and then I think we can wrap it up, because I noticed that Colin is there as well. Well, here's one. What do you think of the morality of Captain Carrot? Do you think he is an ideal, or is he relatable in terms of some flaws?
Carrot is a difficult one, I feel. I mean, obviously he's a good guy. He's also clearly more complex than you would think in first meeting him. If he's relatable or not, I think it's very much in the eye of the reader. Perhaps some people find him relatable. I find him very much not relatable, but that maybe just because I'm not that nice a person, I don't know. I think the characters that are more sort of at odds with themselves, that have more sort of internal struggles that you can actually see going on in them, are more relatable in general. Carrot might have struggles going on within himself as well, but we don't really get to see so much of them. So I think this might make him a less obvious role model. So I mean, the general idea of doing the best of everyone is probably something that some people can relate to. They might be in for some disappointment, though. I'm not sure.
So someone is suggesting here that he might be a human golem.
I have to think about this. I really can't say.
Right. Well, the last question I was going to put to you was, which is your own personal favorite quotation? Do you have one? And can you explain why?
I'm a great fan of the Sam Vimes Booth theory of socioeconomic unfairness. I've quoted that on several occasions. No, but actually, I think my favorite quotation is the one with which I opened this talk, the one about veterinary observing nature and finding it entirely empty of morality. And basically, I think basically what he's saying is that it's part of humanity to do the right thing. And otherwise, so basically, you don't need like a moral principle in the world around you, and you might not even need God, even though I'm not sort of, you know, not opposed to people who find moral guidance in religion, but mostly I think we find it in being human, and I think this is why this is my favorite quotation.
Yes, I mean that was going to be my comment as well. That it seems it strikes me that this you know, the absence of the moral superiority and the coherent value system is quite yeah, something that fits very well with an atheistic worldview. So, but maybe not exclusively.
Yeah, there's still a lot to discuss about this, and I know that there's some ongoing discourse in research and also in fandom. So has been by no way been the end of this, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. I saw Colin Smythe earlier, but he disappeared again. So, Claudia, if you have any final remarks or conclusions, you have an opportunity to do so.
The general question was just that if I feel that there's a difference in the morality of men and women, and I think there isn't, because there are some fantastic female and male moral models, and there are some really terrible characters. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia.